What's up, guys? It's Lord Both here for another video, and the second week numbers are in for Snow White, and they are so bad that they justified making another video for Snow White. Because I know a lot of you are probably like, come on, another video about Snow White? How much can we bang on about a movie that everybody said was going to be bad? It came out, it was bad, and now it's doing poorly in the theaters. But that's the thing, we have to continue talking about it because now it's on the cusp of making history as one of the worst flops for Disney all time. We're talking about potentially losing $300 million plus on this thing. This movie performed so poorly that it was upset by a Sylvester Stallone co-written, Jason Statham starring action movie that was about a vigilante construction worker that is almost a clone of The Beekeeper, which was another Jason Statham action movie for around the same budget that is in the vein of all these sort of B action movies. But even that was enough to upset Snow White at the box office to take the #1 spot in only its second week. This comes to us from the AP. Statham's A Working Man upset Snow White to take #1 at the box office. And it's especially embarrassing because this movie only did $15.2 million in its debut, and it actually performed better than what people thought it was going to. This is the level of embarrassment that this movie now has to contend with, being replaced at the top of the box office in its second week by a B action movie starring Jason Statham. As you can see here, after the second week, $143 million total. Keep in mind, even the shills were saying that this movie had a $250-270 million budget, when in reality it was probably closer to $300-320. This thing had a 66% drop-off from the first week to the second week. And the first week was not good, because the first week they didn't even crack like $100 million. For some comparisons here, this movie is still tracking less than the original 1937 movie, which did all-time $184 million, which when adjusted for inflation is billions of dollars. And most of this money was domestic, our inflation problem here in the United States over the course of history. But not only is this now tracking less than the original 1937 Snow White, and it's going to struggle to get there, it's definitely going to struggle to touch the numbers of Snow White and the Huntsman. Snow White and the Huntsman, by the way, is not considered to be a good movie at all. I actually liked the film when it came out. I thought it was a little bit different, but it kept within the vein and the idea of Snow White, and it was in a time and era where that kind of take on the story made sense and people were more receptive of it. Also, Kristen Stewart's character in the movie is not necessarily a girl boss. She goes on a journey to actually get tough. But as for the numbers here, you can see almost 400 million worldwide. I think this Snow White movie will be lucky to scratch 250. Any way you scratch it up, it's going to be a monumental loss for Disney. Historically bad, like the Marvels level bad. And there were a lot of people that thought this film, despite everything around it, still had a chance. Most of that was due to the Mufasa effect. Because for whatever reason, the live action Lion King movie and the Mufasa movie did pretty well. The Mufasa movie did significantly less than the Lion King movie, but it still got a profit and ended up performing pretty well. And that drove a lot of people to say, hey, maybe this movie still has a chance. Maybe people are still into live action remakes. But it turns out Mufasa was more of an aberration, and the Lion King series is a little different from everything else. Because as we all know, the Little Mermaid live action remake, while it still lost money for the company, actually performed a lot better than this. I mean, look at that right there. The Little Mermaid did almost $570 million. Snow White isn't going to probably make half of that. And I think a lot of people went to the live action Little Mermaid because it was a curiosity. It's something there wasn't really a live action film of yet. Yes, I'm sure there's been small indie ones, but nothing big and upscaled like this. Especially something done by Disney, where it's a retelling of a story they had already done and they already had on the books. And despite the fact that we had to deal with Aquafina singing and some of the terrible news songs put in this movie, they still gave us the classics. They still gave us Part of Your World. They still gave us Under the Sea. And let's be honest, there's a lot more fans, or rather people who have seen The Little Mermaid growing up, that wanted to see a live-action Little Mermaid movie. That maybe had families and kids who had seen the animated movie, wanted to go to this live action, despite the race-swapping controversy. Mostly because the original Little Mermaid came out in the early 90s, I believe, and the original Snow White came out in the 1930s. There are not a lot of people who are OG Disney Snow White fans. She's just not as popular of a princess. And quite honestly, it was always going to be a little bit of an uphill battle to sell her as a live-action remake, with not having as many interested fans. But then you add all the controversies on top of that. Pretty much everything Rachel Zegler has ever said about the movie and politics ever. You add the fact that Gal Gadot can't sing or act. You add the bandits versus actual seven dwarves and having actual little people play dwarves in the movie and etc. You have that all controversy. And then you have to take into effect that the movie just visually does not look good. It's straining on the eyes. And the songs, the music, isn't great. In fact, it's worse than not great. It's worse than even terrible. It is, quite simply, not memorable. And even though this film will be a historically bad movie for Disney in terms of the box office, in terms of culture and society, that's really what this thing is going to be. Not memorable. But those are just my thoughts on all this. If you have your own thoughts, go and leave them in the comments. If you like this video, go and like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, I appreciate you watching all of it. We'll talk to you again later.